original one. I love. Me too. It's small.
And I probably don't need to take up 3 chairs.
Yeah. But this is almost too big. It's I understand. Not that. I was thinking on. The other was right. Yeah, so is it? No, yeah. We need Gabrielle.
Can folks on the Zoom hear me? Just wave or something if you can. Cameron, should I make you a co-host too, or will Gabrielle be sharing the screen for your presentation?
Gabrielle will be.
You two are
correct.
co-presenting, right?
Yes.
Should I make you a co-host too? Could you nod or shake your head?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
that's fine. Yeah.
And it's 10:32, so let's see. We hear you from outside also. Okay, thank you. Adi, are you there? Ready to? Okay.
Yep, I'm here.
I'm going to start with just some welcomes and a introduction, but I just want to make sure you were ready and you can see your capability to share the screen.
I can.
Okay, perfect. All right, everyone, we're a few minutes past 10:30, so I will start the session. My name is Halley Riley, and I am a data services specialist at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. We are housed in the Research Data Services Department in our library. And I said this yesterday, but I would love to chat about our work with anyone who is interested during any of the social sessions. So welcome to today's session D2 on data literacy. Our first presenters will be Aditya, Ranganath, and Jordan Wrigley. So Aditya is a data librarian at the University of Colorado-Boulder, where he has been working since December 2020. Prior to that, he was a CLIR postdoctoral fellow at the New York University Libraries. And his co-presenter, Jordan Wrigley, is a data librarian and scientist with the Center for Research Data and Digital Scholarship at the University of Colorado-Boulder. She has taught about data for over 8 years in several contexts, both inside and outside of academia. She specializes in data ethics and policy, as well as computational methods for evidence synthesis. So I am going to stop sharing and then, okay, thank you, virtually, not outside. Let me see if I can close this. And Adi, are you able to share your screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
Perfect. And we will give you a 3-minute warning.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for for being here. As Halley mentioned, I'm a data librarian at CU Boulder, and I'm going to be presenting this joint work with Jordan Wrigley, but the presentation and the event that I'm going to be talking about was something that we both collaborated on, but unfortunately, she's not going to be able to attend the session, so I'll be presenting on her behalf as well. So I'll start by briefly describing the event that I'll sort of elaborate on over the course of the presentation. So in the summer of 2021, the Center for Research Data and Digital Scholarship, where Jordan and I work, organized and held its inaugural data bootcamp, which was designed for incoming CU Boulder graduate students. It was hosted online over a period of 3 days. And it attracted close to 80 participants and covered a variety of topics pertaining to different stages of the research data lifecycle, from data discovery to data analysis and visualization with R and Python to data preservation and publishing. It also offered participants the opportunity to earn a micro-credential or digital badge that certified their competency in the covered topics. By completing a small data-based project. So the goal of our presentation is to sort of describe the event and share our experiences and some of the resources that we developed so that other data literacy educators who are interested can potentially pursue something similar at their own institutions. So just to provide a brief roadmap, we'll start by talking a little bit about our motivation for organizing the grad student data bootcamp, and then put the event into a bit of context by describing how it's different from data literacy bootcamp style events that have been organized at other institutions and universities. I'll then provide an overview of the bootcamp curriculum that we developed, and a little bit of information about the participants in the event. And finally, I'll conclude by reflecting a bit on the event's successes and shortcomings, and offering some general observations about things that surprised us or which we didn't expect going into the event. So the basic motivation for the bootcamp was an issue that I suspect many of you are probably familiar with. And in particular, incoming graduate students in applied empirical disciplines are often expected to jump right in to doing data-intensive work in their programs, but they might not necessarily be ready to do so for a variety of reasons. So for instance, there's often a big gap between undergraduate training and what students encounter in their graduate programs. I think this is, a particularly big issue in the social sciences, based on my own experiences. Another potential issue is that, students might be switching fields. They might have had their training in one field and they might be jumping into something that's more data intensive for graduate school. Another issue is that there's often a long interval between undergraduate education and entry into graduate school. So people, even though they might have received, good data-based training as undergraduates, they might have forgotten a lot of it. And they might need to sort of refresh their memories and learn about new tools and techniques that have been developed in that interval. So our main motivation for organizing this was to give these students sort of a bird's eye overview of the data lifecycle and hopefully smooth their transition from undergraduate programs or the workforce into a data-intensive graduate program. And our overarching goal was to sort of provide a primer on some of the fundamental issues that we encounter in working with data, so that they could sort of begin their programs with confidence and a sense of efficacy and empowerment. So just to put our event into a bit of context, data-oriented bootcamps seem to be part of a larger trend in data education. So I suspect Many of you have noticed sort of the proliferation of for-profit data science and coding boot camps that are geared to helping people navigate career changes into data-intensive jobs. And within academia, we've seen boot camps and workshop programs oriented towards helping students and research upgrade their computational skill sets. For instance, the carpentries community, which many of you are probably familiar with or a part of, is a good example of this. And I think librarians and research computing specialists often play an important role in organizing data-related boot camps on campus. And when Jordan and I were doing background research on data boot camps held at other institutions, we came across materials and presentations from other places like UCLA and Columbia, where librarians and research computing specialists helped put together events that were sort of along these lines. And I provided the links to some of those events here if you're interested in seeing what they did. So the approach of UCLA and Columbia sort of informed our thinking about how to structure our bootcamp at CU. We found that the UCLA and Columbia boot camps were centered on carpentry's workshops and lesson plans. And even though Jordan and I are involved with the carpentries, we decided that instead of focusing on data analysis and computational skills, we wanted sort of a broader curriculum that encompassed the entire range of the data lifecycle that included topics that aren't covered by the carpentries, like data discovery and data publishing. So while sections of our bootcamp were influenced by carpentry's lesson plans, all of the educational material that we developed that was related to our bootcamp was sort of developed from scratch in collaboration with our instructor colleagues. So just a few more details about what the bootcamp looked like. It was held over the course of 3 days, about a week or so before the start of the semester. We created a GitHub repository to house all of the bootcamp information and lesson plans, and disseminated this information to participants through a corresponding GitHub page. And I've linked to that here if you're interested in taking a look in more detail about the individual lesson plans. Substantively, bootcamp instructors taught a total of 7 sessions on a variety of topics across the entire research lifecycle. Topics included GitHub and GitHub pages, tools for reproducibility, such as containerization with Docker, data discovery and data evaluation, data analysis in R, data analysis in Python, data publishing and archiving, and data ethics. As I mentioned earlier, we also piloted a bootcamp-specific micro-credential in collaboration with the micro-credential program at CU's Office of the Registrar. To earn the micro-credential, participants had to complete a small project and post their project materials to a newly created GitHub repository. The earned micro-credential included a link to that GitHub repository and also allowed participants to display it on their LinkedIn profiles or any other profile of their choosing. I've also linked to the page containing information about the micro-credential project if you're interested in taking a look at that. So just a little bit of information about the participants. There were 79 registered participants for the bootcamp. The original limit was initially 75, but some people came in off the wait list. We did some marketing to get the word out, but not a whole lot. So there seemed to be a lot of organic demand for an event like this. Most of the participants were from engineering, natural science, and quantitative social science disciplines. There wasn't much representation from the humanities or qualitative social sciences. And it seemed like a substantial majority of the participants had some prior exposure to at least some of the material that we covered. which suggests that a lot of them were using the bootcamp as a refresher course of sorts. Anecdotally, it's also worth mentioning that a fair amount of the participants were international students, and in some cases were participating from their home countries before coming over here. And our sense was that the event was quite useful for them, not only in terms of the material covered, but also as a way to connect with fellow students before arriving on campus. So now that I've summarized some of the main features of the bootcamp, just want to reflect on some of its successes and shortcomings and offer some more general observations. In terms of the successes, Jordan and I thought that the bootcamp micro-credential, which is now officially a part of CU's curriculum, took a lot of administrative work to get up and going. And we look back on that as a really worthwhile effort, especially since the projects submitted by students were very thoughtful and well executed. We also received a lot of positive feedback to the effect that the sessions on GitHub pages, data discovery, and data publishing were really useful. And we think that that speaks to the value of incorporating different stages of the data lifecycle beyond just data analysis and coding into a data bootcamp curriculum. We also received feedback saying that participants found the lesson plan documentation that we distributed through the bootcamp GitHub page to be a really useful set of resources that they referred back to over the course of their first year in graduate school. And a final success that's worth mentioning is that installation and setup issues didn't pose a significant roadblock. We did encourage participants to install necessary software on their local machines, but we also had a virtual environment, which our research computing colleagues set up for us as a backup. So anyone that was having issues on the day of installing anything, they were still able to follow along using the virtual environment. So that was really helpful and everything went quite smoothly. In terms of opportunities for improvement, one issue that came up was that participants without prior R or Python experience sometimes found it challenging to keep up with instructors during the lessons on data analysis and visualization. So one priority for us is to try and explore ways to slow some of that material down a bit in a way that's more friendly to people that are coming at this without any prior background. We also noticed meaningful attrition over the course of the 3-day event. So like I said before, we started out with about 80 participants on the first day in the first session. But by day 3, for the last session, we were down to about half of that. And so we want to find ways to keep attrition down in the future. Like I said earlier, we were happy with our work in getting the micro-credential together. But on the flip side, it's worth noting that only about 10 participants ended up submitting projects and earning the digital badge or micro-credential. So we thought that that's a good start, but we'd like to increase that number in the future, especially since most of the participants did indicate an interest in pursuing the micro-credential in the pre-bootcamp survey. And finally, we'd really like to see more participation from students in less technical fields, perhaps the humanities and the more qualitative social sciences, because we think that they would really benefit from participating. But like I said before, most of our participants ended up being folks from more technical and computation-intensive fields. And just a couple of observations that I'd like to throw out before concluding. We were surprised by the popularity of the data discovery and data publishing sessions, since it seemed like the big initial draw for the participants was the Python and R sessions. And we think that highlights a gap in the knowledge of even technically proficient incoming graduate students, and suggests ways in which librarians and data literacy instructors can productively engage with these sorts of students. We were also surprised by the fact that many of the participants, even those familiar with GitHub and using it for version control, weren't familiar with GitHub pages and how to use GitHub as a web hosting platform. People told us that they thought GitHub pages would be a really useful way for them to create work portfolios or landing pages for their projects. And that feedback suggests more broadly that GitHub pages could be a really valuable tool that data educators could teach the communities that they work with. On a related note, as I had mentioned earlier, we used GitHub to store and disseminate all of our teaching materials. And we weren't super intentional about that choice at the beginning, but we definitely came to appreciate how useful that was. It's made it really easy to iterate and make changes to subsequent versions of the bootcamp without having to start from scratch or pull material from a bunch of different places. It also creates a really useful starting point for potential future bootcamp organizers at CU so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And it also allows us to share our work with the broader community. So if you're potentially interested in hosting a similar event at your institution, we invite you to fork our repository and potentially use it as a template to begin building a bootcamp adapted to the needs of your institution. And finally, we were struck by the fact that the bootcamp seemed to generate more participant interest and engagement than some of our other events over the course of the semester, such as one-off workshops. And so that's something to keep in mind in terms of thinking about how best to engage with the campuses that we serve. And we were also very happy with the way the bootcamp functioned as a showcase for the center. And it allowed us to connect with a really large group of graduate students very early in their graduate careers and introduce them to the center and to resources that they might otherwise not have been familiar with or aware of. And we did notice that several bootcamp participants subsequently arranged for consultations with us on their individual projects. So we think the bootcamp did a really nice job of helping us to build meaningful relationships with graduate students who are, of course, a very important campus constituency for the sort of work that we do. If we have time for questions, I'm happy to take them now, or feel free to get in touch with me over email if you'd like to chat more about anything that I've talked about. But really appreciate all of you taking the time.
Thank you so much for that. I'm personally really excited about exploring your materials. I've been wanting to organize an event like this at my own institution. So when you said we could adapt your materials, that was very exciting to me. So what other questions? Okay, I see someone in the back.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. And you might have answered this and I didn't hear it, but were your courses synchronous, asynchronous, or a hybrid?
They were synchronous. Yeah, so they were, like I said earlier, they were delivered via Zoom, but they were synchronous. We did have asynchronous sessions, sort of office hours, where people could come by with questions, but the lesson material themselves were all presented synchronously.
I see a question from Zoom. Could you put the GitHub link into the Zoom chat, please?
Yeah, definitely. Just give me
Excellent.
one second.
And then another question from the audience while you're doing that.
Yeah, I was curious. You mentioned that the international students found it particularly helpful for getting networking and meeting other people in the boot camp. Did you have any set networking time set aside during your workshop, or is that something that you're hoping to include more of in future boot camps?
That's a really good point. We didn't have specific networking sessions. There was a bit of networking going on, I think, in the office hour sessions and in the breaks between sessions, but we didn't have dedicated time for that. But that's something that I think would be good to consider, and would definitely be easier as well. I think when we hopefully eventually do this in person.
I think that's all the time we have for questions today, but thank you so much.
Thank you. And I put the link into the chat if anyone's interested.
Could you stop sharing your screen, please? Are you sharing your screen still now?
I don't think I am. I
Okay,
think
you know you're not. Okay. And then, yeah, so we'll do this. No. Okay, okay. Okay, and let me just. What is it the, they can see this? Oh, the speaker view? No? Well, now it's like that here. Okay, we don't want that. Oh. Yeah, that would be great.
I might not be able to do this either, but. Okay, so let's put this in the screen share.
We are currently screen sharing now, so in presentation mode.
Yes. Present. And then they see that.
And then on Zoom, you're seeing the
And then let
notes.
me
Oh,
let's
try
get this one. Is that good? Perfect.
Okay,
Now
cool.
you can introduce us.
Okay, so next we'll be hearing from Meryl Brodsky and Hannah Chapman Tripp. Meryl is the College of Communications and School of Information librarian at the University of Texas at Austin. She became interested in data while working as a corporate librarian. When she returned to academia in 2015, she was highly motivated to begin educating students about data and data literacy. Just recently, she co-edited a book containing classes for librarians to teach called the Data Literacy Cookbook, which I am personally very excited to check out, which will be published by the American College and Research Librarians Division of the ALA by the end of this year. And Hannah has served as the biosciences librarian at the UT Library since 2019. In this position, she advocates for open science initiatives and open educational resources, in addition to her librarian duties of supporting the research process, working on systematic review teams, instructing and assisting students in searching for resources, and collecting materials for liaison departments. Hannah has a passion for data-driven decision-making and for promoting an equitable landscape for all students approaching and completing their degrees.
Can y'all hear me? Great. Well, welcome to our session titled Data Literacy Competencies, a Scoping Review. While this talk won't report on the results of an entire scoping review, we'll attempt to inform you of our progress so far and our findings and our objectives for this whole process. So my name is Chapman Tripp.
And I'm Meryl Brodsky.
And we are both employed as liaison librarians at the University of Texas at Austin and have been there for about the last 3 years. And so a little bit of more background about us. We're actually not Texans, but we wanted to bring something of the Texas theme to this presentation because whatever you've heard about Texas, it's probably true. So we'll talk a little bit about why we've embarked on this project, what a scoping review is, what the process of conducting a scoping review looks like, and what we found so far, including informational consultative skills, technical skills, and job ad requirements for data librarians. Last, we'll close with where we are in the review. So Meryl and I each have several years of experience working on a local systematic review interest group at our university. And we have supported scholars in conducting evidence synthesis from the role of consulting to fully developing the search. Data management and data services are also core elements of our positions, including hosting university-wide workshops, leading and serving on a team to support data management planning, that is, helping students and scholars individually as needs arise, and working to create a model for data set curation upon deposit in our local data repository. We are also both referred to in our job titles as liaison librarians, meaning that we are the point of connection between specific departments on our campus and the library services. So the roles of liaisons, also known as subject librarians, has been changing recently from working with print collections and serving at a set location for scholars to come and ask us for help, to a more outreach-driven model, which includes data support tasks and increased involvement with the research lifecycle. So our ideas were to combine these two interests of review methodologies and data roles and conduct a review on current training and preparation available for librarians. So what is a scoping review, you might ask? It is a formalized process for synthesizing evidence. It is a review, of course, with a specific methodology in place that attempts to gather lots of work that might be relevant. Then once that body of literature is collected, to go through a process of including or excluding articles based on the titles and abstracts. Then once we are at the point where we have a likely set of articles, we'll go through the entirety of those articles and make decisions about what to retain in our review, and then analyze it and describe the state of the field. So this may seem like a lot of work, and you may be wondering why someone would do this. And we think we have a few good reasons. For one, having a body of knowledge adds value to the profession. And there's a lot out there on data and libraries, but it's not all agreed upon or codified in any way, except of course for the stuff that is, like the FAIR principles or data curation. And lastly, librarians have not always been doing this work. So it's been within the recent history that libraries have started really offering these data-based services to researchers. So we wanted to find out how librarians were being prepared for these data services and what some common competencies were and were highlighted as important for the whole process of reskilling, and what areas librarians may feel that they need further training. So what this looks like practically is developing and testing a broad search string, executing a search string in multiple databases, exporting all of those results and going through each title and abstract to determine whether or not an article is relevant, as well as removing some duplicates. You'll note on this slide that a charting mechanism is in place. And this is what's referred to as a Prisma chart. And this is a mainstay of many evidence synthesis processes. So you can note from this chart specific quantities of articles that we've retrieved, identified duplicates for, and excluded based on an initial screening. And this chart, when published with our hopeful eventual paper, will extend down off this slide, of course, and contain much more information about our process. So we started our process in thinking specifically about data literacy, but then we quickly broadened our scope to research data management and research data services. So it is somewhat difficult to discern where data literacy ends and data services begin, or it could be that these services are more broadly focused on supporting open science and open scholarship. So wherever we are on the spectrum of this data literacy conundrum, we really saw it as important to use multiple terms to target the concept of data literacy. So in thinking further about our own process, we noted that it is somewhat mirroring the development of RDS or research data services at universities. So starting in the early 2010s, when the National Science Foundation established the requirement that a data management plan be submitted with each grant, librarians then realized that they could have a role in research data management. Since then, data management has transformed into data services, so more services are being offered. And in the future, we envision open science and open data being kind of a standard offering under the broad umbrella of research support services. So there are really few well-defined competencies in the profession of academic librarianship. So for instance, no one says to be a liaison librarian, you need to understand these 5 basic concepts. So the ALA, or the American Library Association, is one of few bodies that defines parts of the profession. So ALA accredits degree programs in the United States and in Canada that meet certain criteria in the curricula. So most library and information school students are required to take some kind of an information structures course, a reference course, cataloging course, and electives related to the area that you want to specialize in, like children's literature or social sciences bibliography. But programs are really more flexible now, but perhaps everyone on an academic library's track should be taking a data course, which could be data for librarians or open science. And in library science in general, there's sort of this trope that exists that you learn very little practical knowledge in school and near everything on the job. And I don't know whether that's true or false or where on the dichotomy I land. I'd have to think more about that. But perhaps it doesn't have to be that way in the future. So we are seeking to identify these data competencies and define what is agreed upon and what is not.
In this next section, we'll take a look at the skills and competencies that we found in the course of our research. Many articles said librarians should get research data services training, and they didn't say much more than that. There were also articles that said librarians should get training from these specific places like the Data Curation Center, RDM Rose, RDMLA, and Data One. And these are well-designed places to get self-trained. There are also, of course, great organizations like IASSIST and RDAP and that offer terrific workshops. And all these offerings are great for self-motivated people. The quality of education is high, but the timing and the sequencing can be difficult to figure out if you're new to the field. This is one of the reasons we wanted to do this review, is to be able to organize and create a big picture of these skills or competencies. Also, we discussed the differences between what librarians need to know as from the educator perspective and also from the practitioner perspective. We think there's value in understanding both sides, especially as it pertains to developing courses in iSchool curricula or standards. But our scoping review is really more focused on the skills from the educator perspective, leaning more into the data services model. We decided to leave the practitioner work to the areas it might belong with, like user experience, assessment, collection development, or instruction. The work of practitioners, though, we don't want to discount the work of practitioners. We all work with data. It might be bibliographic data, it could be use data or data from workshops. So librarians who say they aren't comfortable working with data may not realize how much data they already collect and analyze in their current roles. Articles tend to cluster skills or competencies differently. Carol Tenepier and her colleagues wrote about these in 2012 and even before then, and she classified them as informational, consultative, and technical hands-on. The informational consultative involve outreach and collaboration, creating instructional materials and training coworkers. These skills are very important, and they're on many data-related job ads as well. I divided the informational consultative skills into three main areas: communication, training, collaboration, and library engagement. Collaboration and library engagement includes working with other campus departments like the Office of Research or IT or administrators to support and develop technology, infrastructure, and policies. For example, at our institution, Research Data Services recently participated in an initiative titled Sustainable Open Scholarship, which linked together faculty, library, students, and campus administrators. In some articles, these informational consultative competencies are called soft skills, and the articles discuss soft skills versus hard skills. I don't like these categories because it bothers me that the soft skills are people related and the hard skills are technical, so they're scary and hard. In order to do much of the work like data management plan consultation, you need to have both of those sets of skills. So here are the technical hands-on researched competencies, and they're more data focused. So data literacy has been defined in many ways, and we think of it as being akin to information literacy in that it teaches students to be critical consumers of data. Data management is more about being a producer of data, and I'm thinking here of graduate students performing research activities. This has to do with the treatment of data throughout the research data lifecycle. Data curation has to do with the tail end of the research data lifecycle, in which researchers consider how to make their data accessible for the long term. Last is this category called technology, tools, and software. And this area is emerging as tools to do data analysis and data visualization improve and become more user-friendly. These skills are where software and data carpentries come into play, as well as understanding the kinds of tools that are available for different tasks. This may be an area where librarians partner to get these skills. So in looking at these just a little bit more closely, and I think there would be subcategories under all of these. Here are just a few of the skills involved in data literacy. Data management is something that researchers don't often learn via a formal education. It's usually taught in a lab or by going through the process of research or applying for a grant. And depending on the discipline, the work of managing data may not be apparent. Data curation has to do with how to preserve and save data and use data repositories and make sure to comply with FAIR principles. And here are some examples of the tools, technology, and software. So being familiar with all the tools, technology, and software may not be a reasonable expectation for librarians who work in institutions where they already wear many hats. As I mentioned before, it might be the domain of campus partners. But the literature does describe libraries with research data services offering these services at larger research institutions. Researchers need support to analyze, manipulate, and store the data that they created or found. Also covered in the literature was job ads. Many researchers looked at data librarian job ads to learn what skills are actually required, and so here they are. Research data curation and management come first, and this may be because Many non-data librarians are already taking on data literacy. Next is to have some expertise with software. There's no preference as to the software, although some job ads specified Python or R, and some job ads just said software. The next requirement was to be familiar with technologies and standards. Next is research and support, a very broad category. Data sources come next with the familiarity with the data lifecycle and digital repositories. Job ads also looked for people with subject expertise. I think this gets at the idea that the person must have experience with research data as a producer. Last, scholarly communication is listed, and I think this generally has to do with publishing and copyright. So you might be wondering if anybody's done this kind of review before, and there certainly are reviews on other similar topics, but we didn't find any exactly on this. Notably and surprisingly, two other Texas universities are reviewing data literacy. There's a team at the University of North Texas looking at defining data literacy via an IMLS grant, and a Texas team at A&M looked at a scoping review that looked at empirical research regarding research data management. But back to our review. We've done the preliminary searching in the databases. We've collected about 2,000 articles, read the abstracts, decided which are in or out, and we're going to look at them individually and come to agreement about which we'll retain. It's likely about 10% or 200 articles will remain. And next we'll read these articles and extract information from them to create the actual review. We'll write it up and publish it so that other librarians don't have to go through this process. They'll be able to see what skills are required for working with data. They'll be able to find instruction either in an iSchool or on their own. The curriculum, so to speak, will be mapped. There is a lot of great material out there that's been written, and much of it by the people in this room and at this conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you both so much. That was, as someone relatively new to the field, I really appreciated the kind of like zoom out of the skills and interrelated kind of sub-disciplines. And as someone who loves systematic reviews, I geeked out a little. So what questions do we have?
Hey, I was interested in the data discovery thing that you were talking about, whether or not, or if you can talk a little bit more about how you see that fitting into this as in connecting it to the earlier presentation.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would definitely put data discovery in the data literacy area. So it was actually surprising to me to hear that previous presentation where, you know, they found in the boot camp that the graduate students really appreciated learning more about data discovery, because I would have thought that those searching skills might be things that have been covered in undergrad, but apparently there's still demand for it. So yeah, I would have placed it in that area.
We have a question from our virtual audience. How different is scoping reviews from other types of literature reviews?
So scoping reviews attempt to gather like all of the things that would be on a particular topic or responding to a particular question. And it's much more process oriented, whereas other types of reviews, just like a general lit review, can really be sort of on what you find and what you curate yourself. And I think there is an element of reproducibility that is valued in the evidence synthesis process. So you kind of publish what you've done, you lay it out so that others could follow in your tracks in the future.
Yeah, I would add that scoping reviews are helpful for understanding a large landscape. So you can sort of say there are different pockets here, here, and here. And in doing that, it's easier to identify gaps.
Any last questions? Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was really great.
Thank you.
All right, are you seeing the right thing? Looks like you are.
I think we are. So our next presenters will be Gabrielle Hayden, who you can see on the screen there. Gabrielle is the Research Data Management and Reproducibility Librarian at the University of Oregon. Gabrielle consults with students, faculties, and researchers on research data management, sourcing and sharing data, and best practices in computational reproducibility. She earned her PhD in English literature from Yale University and her BA in English from Reed College. She has worked with open source software and enterprise database reporting in the nonprofit and private sectors, as well as Multnomah County and Meryl University libraries. Her interests include equity and open access, transparency and reproducibility in the humanities and social sciences, an intersection between private sector and academic reproducibility, and DevOps practices. Her co-presenter, Cameron Mulder, is a statistical consultant at the University of Oregon. Cameron consults with students, faculty, and researchers on statistical methods, survey design, and data analysis. He earned his MS in economics from Portland State University and has a BS in political science and economics from Oregon State. He has worked on a wide range of research projects during his time as an adjunct research associate with a survey research lab and regional research institute at Portland State University. His interests include reproducible research methods, data visualization, and the open science movement.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our talk. Gabrielle and I will be talking today about strategies for inclusion in data literacy programs. And just to tell you a little bit, I just want to share a little bit first about what our department is. We're a very small department, so it's Gabrielle, myself, and then we have another colleague, Kathy, who we put up here. And the mission for the University of Oregon Library's Data Services Department is we make data skills, statistical programming, cartography resources, and data management accessible to all. And we're a relatively small department. We have 2 librarians, a statistical consultant, myself, and then we have 3 undergraduates who work with us as student employees about 10 hours a week. And our services really kind of can be divided into 2 main things. We have statistical consulting services where we help people with things like data analysis and stats programming in R and Python. And we also have data management and cartographic reference support services that are done by our friend Kathy, who does like GIS data, maps, and aerial photography. So those are kind of the 2 things. And additionally, like many of the departments that we've been hearing from here, we offer a lot of workshops. So every term we offer some intro to R programming workshops and Python workshops and a variety of other workshops. And one of the interesting things that we've started doing, and we'll talk about a little bit more later in this talk, is we also have been working with the McNair Scholars Program to develop workshops specifically for those students. And those are first generation and underserved students. And that's been a really big program for us and something we're very proud of. Now, our user stats, just to give you an idea of kind of the people that come and use our services here at the UO, are mostly graduate students. And I don't think that's too unsurprising. But one of the things that we are proud of, we really do get broad participation across the entire UO community, with even faculty and faculty and staff, and some people unaffiliated with UO, like alumni, still come back and ask us questions. And we even get the occasional community member who kind of stops in on some of our services. Now, one of the reasons that we signed up to do this talk is we started noticing that our services are incredibly popular. And just to give you kind of an idea of what the last year has been for us, we did approximately 450 stats consultations. And what we kind of define that as any time we work with a patron for about a half an hour on a data stats problem. And we also offered over the last year 62 unique workshop sessions that attracted about 345 attendees. Now, as we saw earlier from our slide, we're a relatively small department, so this has really maxed us out. And what we found really interesting in our informal review of the people participating in our services is that the vast majority of the participants are women, and many come from underrepresented groups. And this is currently an informal survey of just what we've noticed and what people have kind of commented on with us. And we're working with the institution to do a more formal analysis of this. But the fact that we're seeing a disproportionate representation of these underserved groups coming to our services, we don't think that's an accident. That's something intentional. And Gabrielle is going to share with you some thoughts that we have on why we're seeing these numbers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll just add, so those consultation numbers don't include our reference consultations, which is most of Kathy's sphere. So I think that also gives you a sense. This is mostly just myself and Cameron and our student workload. But I think a good informal anecdote supporting our sort of general estimates that we are in fact reaching more students who are traditionally underserved is I was helping lead an R workshop right before the pandemic. And I think Cameron remembers that essentially everyone, and there was about 12 participants, and that they were basically all women or people of color. And a middle-aged white man came in and said, am I in the room? Is this the R class? And he was very polite about it and very positive, but it was clear from the way our exchange went that it was essentially the demographics of the room were throwing him off, which seemed like a good illustration that we're doing what we're hoping to do. So there's really three things here that we think have led to this success. We were founded to serve unrepresented students, and we continue to work to hire for diversity and foster a culture of inclusivity. So Jonathan Kane, who's now in upper library admin at Columbia, founded the department prioritizing the needs of underserved students. And I think, his visibility on the predominantly white campus of UO can't be understated. And as two white people, Cameron and I definitely depend on that legacy. And then we also have been really intentional about hiring for diversity in a lot of ways. When Jonathan hired me, my background in the humanities was a kind of way of hiring for diversity within data science. But we have also just worked since then to really take advantage of diverse student skills and social networks. So for example, in our first year of this pilot, what was initially a pilot program, one of our student instructors was from China, and she proposed teaching R in Chinese, and we thought, what a great idea. That workshop series was really well attended, and then for literally the next 2 years, we had a really disproportionate attendance from Chinese-speaking students, which was pretty great. And Cameron.
And We also have been very intentional about fostering a culture of inclusivity and openness to newcomers. And that starts with how we've been advertising our services. We use what we call an aggressively personalized outreach approach, where we customize our messaging to each individual that we reach out to. And we actually spend a lot of time thinking about the language that we use and who we need to connect with to make sure that our information about our services, our workshops, and our consultations gets out to the people that need it most. And we use a lot of the skills we teach, such as using databases and using text mining methods to get at the people that we need to connect with. And we also make sure to use tools and curriculum that's also developed to be very inclusive. So we focus on open source tools like many people do, and that allows people to install this on their own software without needing a license or don't need to go get approval from anyone or send anyone a check. And also we use the software carpentries pretty extensively. And one of the reasons we use that is we feel that it does a really great job of being good for people at all levels of skill, for everybody from the beginner to a more advanced user can really benefit from going through, I think, a lot of the software carpentries curriculum. And we also use customer service methods that really meet our patrons where they're at. And we work a lot with our student employees to make sure that they understand how to make everyone feel welcome and included. And this includes running events like we do a weekly coffee and code session that is just this informal talk that for people interested in data topics that we host in the library. And we've been able to attract people at all levels of kind of working with data and working in research. We have very advanced people in machine learning who come to our sessions. And then we have like classified staff from the university that come into our sessions, and people from the community who just want to talk about these issues and want to learn more about data visualization or any data topic. And these sessions kind of model practice of bringing everyone together and making sure everyone feels included and can participate in these important topics and methods. And let's see. And so our focus has been on making sure that we get students who have not had opportunities for to learn these types of skills before. And it's been incredibly successful for us. And we could have kind of gone a different route. We could have focused on just maximizing our numbers. And there's different ways we could have done our advertising and different ways we could have set up our workshops and our curriculum that might have given us more numbers, possibly. But we instead set out to make our services as open and inclusive as possible. And we still got numbers that far exceeded our wildest expectations.
Yeah, and I guess another way of saying this, I really like the analogy from inclusive design of the curb cuts, right? That when you add curb cuts to sidewalks so that wheelchairs can go on them, you also make them more accessible for people with strollers or carrying heavy objects or skateboarders, right? So that when you think about your most vulnerable users, you also make things better for everyone who's using your services. And also, I can't believe it, this is the part where it's 1:30 in the morning our time. So my apologies. I put up the slides with the janky version of this cycle. There's a very classy version that's in the Zenodo repository. So do forgive me, especially Cameron, who saw the real thing. But we just wanted to end with kind of an example of some of the virtuous cycles, supposed to say cycles, that we have observed. So for example, starting with Jonathan, our department has had a strong relationship to the McNair Scholars Program, which is a US federal program targeted at first generation and underserved students. Because we volunteered with that program and were involved with that program, we attracted a lot of students early on. And one of those students attended all of our workshops and was a fantastic and interactive student, and then came to us and said, hey, I think you should have a position specifically to support McNair students, which we didn't have and didn't have funding for, but we thought it was such a good idea that we requested some dedicated funding and made that happen. And I think it's been quite successful. And that student was actually then accepted to a graduate program there. So we're hoping to continue to work with her when she's a GE to support non-traditional and minority students through that program. And you know, we could, for example, have had a student targeting you know, the School of Ed, which is really big, or business. And in fact, we may, you know, propose in the future funding to do that kind of broader outreach as our capacity allows. But it's been interesting to see how that more targeted support has actually also led to good responses. And then a second anecdote there, we early on did some personalized outreach with a faculty member who was actually interviewed in this great little profile that the Center for Women's Studies, is that what it's called still? I think it's the Center for Women's Studies on campus did a profile of that faculty member, but then, you know, that faculty member took a class. She said in this interview, it was a judgment-free zone of this R workshop, which was the opposite of my college stats experience, right? So both she had that experience, then we were able to get some media talking about that. And then 2 years later, that faculty member recommended us to students at an event targeting students of color. One of the students attending that session then came to a workshop, and we ended up chatting because the student was really just very positive and excited, and encouraged that student to apply for a job with us. So that kind of intensive work that I remember at the beginning, you know, when Jonathan shared his vision, I sort of had this feeling like, okay, I hope this all works. But it's been good. So I guess I'll end by asking, you know, what has worked for you? This is something that needs constant improvement and self-awareness. You know, I think the default, it's so easy for things to default back to people not necessarily feeling safe. And we are, you know, two white folks now running the department, and we want to constantly be thinking about how we can improve upon what we're doing. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. It's given, I think, a lot of us a lot to think about. What questions do we have for Gabrielle and Cameron? I see there's something in the chat. Or any anecdotes from your experiences as in response to Gabrielle's question? Well, I'll just say, as a woman working in research data services, I really do appreciate the desire to make these things non-scary. It's something that I was always terrified of this stuff. I never thought I would be doing this, and having a mentor who kind of held my hand through it really helped. And so that's, thinking of the cycle that you're on your last slide, that's something that I really try to embrace in my career. So I just wanted to say that I appreciate that perspective. And we do have one question. So
So you mentioned part of your marketing and outreach strategy was personalizing emails. What sort of personalization would you include in them? Is it like, would you tell people about particular services you think would be of interest, or something about the field that they're studying? Or yeah, I was just interested to hear more.
Yeah, so well, maybe Cameron could talk about it more. We cheated. I got access to the institutional data warehouse, and which tells us the names of faculty and the classes they teach. And then we wrote an R script to search for keywords, cleaned it up, and then sent mail merge that was dear professor last name. We think that students from insert class would really benefit from our services. Why? And then we would have we would do different keyword searches. So this last term, it was focused on, we had one that was sort of for digital humanists based on a talk that we had, and then a digital humanities focused set of workshops. And then we had another that was more general stats and social science, hard science focused.
I would argue that
essentially-
using your skills wisely and not your data skills and not cheating, but
we really leaned heavily into learning from email marketing, essentially, but using it for good instead of evil. We found, and this is something we did a little session with a lot of the librarians at the University of Oregon to kind of explain these skills. And I explained to people that this is something that we would all do if we could. We would personally write an email to every member of the UO community, kind of explaining our services in ways that are relevant for them if we could. And the reality is that, that's 20,000 people, and we don't have that time for that. But we can use these tools to be able to make a more personalized approach. And this helps get people kind of feeling comfortable about our services. When they see an email that is for them, is about their classes that they're taking, and isn't just this general spam email that goes to a list, they feel more included. And they feel like, oh, these services from Data Services are something that they really do want me there, because they're taking the time to create a message that is specific to me. And I think we can use the skills that we have to do that more, and to make our services more open and accessible to everyone.
you may get an email from me asking for that R script.
Absolutely, hit us up.
Yeah.
You know where to find us.
Any other questions before we move on to our final presentation? Well, thank you so much. Let's give them another hand. That was really wonderful. Okay. Are folks on Zoom seeing the notes? Yeah, what did you do last?
Unshare. Oh, you already did that.
Or
So
do we
I
need to
put it
reshare the
in,
full screen
I put it in the presentation first
and then shared.
and then make sure it's up there. And then when you share, just go to one of
okay.
the screens that is not that screen.
You have to do a new share.
It should be updating, Sarah.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you, Hannah. Okay, so for our last talk, we have Dr. Robert Buwule. He is a senior assistant librarian at the Kyambogo. We were discussing pronunciation earlier, Kyambogo University. He is currently heading the library ICT section. Prior to that, he headed the Faculty of Special Needs and Rehabilitation Library at Kyambogo University. He holds a PhD in Information Studies from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. He's on the executive committee of the IASSIST African chapter and IASSIST Fellow 2022. He has worked as a consultant on user-friendly libraries, database searching, data mining, ease of information access, knowledge management, and research and development projects. Dr. Buwule is a published author of several peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, and conference papers. He supervises undergraduate BLIS student research projects. He has served as an external examiner of information science master's and PhD dissertations from UNISA. He was one of the executive members of the ULIA from 2012 to 2016. And on the organizing committee of the SCECSAL 2018 conference and IASSIST African Workshop 2021. His interests in research work relate with ICT4D, management of information and information institutions, data literacy, using information access, and disability information services, research and innovation information services, and entrepreneurship. So thank you for welcoming him to the podium.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, for that warm introduction. And good morning, colleagues, both here and online. Yeah, that is the title of my presentation this morning, Data Literacy, a Catalyst for Improving Kyambogo University Academic Staff Research and Publication Productivity. Like my earlier colleagues, this is a collaborative study. Three of us are the ones that are engaged in this study. I and Mr. Edward Mukiibi are senior assistant librarians at Kyambogo University, and we are working with our university librarian, Dr. Eliz, Nassali State. That will be the outline of our presentation this morning. Because of time, I don't think I'll have to read through it. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that leading universities around the world are driven by STEMs, which stands for sciences, technology, engineering, mathematics, and social sciences. And it has been observed according to literature that there's an increasing involvement of the use of data to enhance research and publication productivity. Actually, it does not only apply in research and publication. Data, like our previous speakers have said, it is required in teaching, in even other spheres, when conducting research in the pure applied and social sciences. So for academic staff to be productive, they will need a certain level of statistical efficiency, causal interpretation, and the empirical examples according to Angrist and Pish. So like they normally say that you either publish or perish. For academic staff to publish, they will need to be oriented towards developing empirical data literacy skills to remain relevant to their employers, according to those authors. So there are quite a number of data literacy definitions and lenses. In our study, we chose to use this lens whereby we created a link between data literacy and research and publication. And we thought that data literacy is the knowledge that links research data generation, the research data generated from research labs, from the field, through the research cycle up to the stage when the data is turned into research papers or scholarly papers, or when that data is deposited in repositories. In other words, data literacy enables academic staff to apply statistical knowledge while writing a variety of sole, joint, or corporate scholarly publications, according to Carson. Briefly about Kyambogo University. This is one of the public universities in Uganda. It was created in 2003. It was after a merger of former institutions, the Institute of Teacher Education Kyambogo, the Uganda Polytechnic Kyambogo, and the Uganda National Institute of Special Education. So these three institutes merged together to form what we know as Kyambogo University today. Currently, we have 25,000 students and 425 academic staff. For some of you who have never been to that part of the world, it is found in Banda, Nakawa Division, Kampala City, Central Uganda. So if you pass there, please, you can check on us. Kyambogo University has 3 niches, and it strives to promote and advance knowledge and development skills in science and technology and education. But also we know that data literacy is a fairly new and under-researched construct in Uganda, and more so in Kyambogo University. Kyambogo also has a research agenda which covers 9 areas. We have interest in doing research in agriculture, in food security, in education, good governance, in environment and natural resources, regional integration, socioeconomic development, science and technology and innovation. So those are the areas that we focus on as we encourage our academic staff to conduct research and publish. Prior to this study, I and my colleagues, we conducted a study to assess the academic, the productivity, the research and publication productivity of academic staff in Kyambogo University between those years. And what came out was that for those 17 years, a total number of 440 publications and were published by 199 academic staff. Remember, the total number of academic staff are 425, of which 192 have PhDs. So you can see for yourself that productivity. When we broke it down by faculty, there are 7, at the time of the study, there were 7 faculties and schools. The biggest faculty, the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, which has 130 academic staff, of which 50 have PhDs. We found out that only 35 have publications and a total number of 90 publications. Education, which has 47 and 24 PhDs, they had 38. 38 of them have managed to publish 106 publications. The most productive faculty is the Faculty of Science. I remember, I think it was Ranganath who said that the students from the sciences were had interest in data literacy compared to what? To those from humanities. So here we can see that even here the Faculty of Science is the most productive faculty with 110. So that is the productivity in brief of Kyambogo University between 2003 and 2020. And we also had interest in the prolific authors per faculty. And we also found out that the prolific author in Kyambogo University was from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Department of Sociology, Meryl, 135, followed by 1 from Education, 116. But the other faculties, you can see how they're performing. As we went further to review literature, we understood that for for academic staff to be productive as far as research and publication is concerned, they don't all have to be at the same level. They are, according to the literature, there are 3 levels of which academic staff should have data literacy skills. The beginner level, whereby they should have at least some skills in finding open data, should have skills in evaluating, citing that data, and organizing. Then there's the intermediate level and even the advanced level. So when we tried to align it to research and publication, we saw that at least for academic staff to be productive, at least all of them should be at the level, at the beginning level. And by so doing, they should be able also to encourage their students to have those same skills. Then we went further to observe that those academic staff who are actively involved in research and publication should have the intermediate level data literacy skills. Then there should also be some champions who can have the skills like in visualization, in operating the tools that we've already been talking about by my colleagues who spoke earlier. So basing on that, the aim of this study was to explore how equipping Kyambogo University academic staff with data literacy skills can improve their research publications productivity. This study, we reviewed literature. Unlike my colleagues Meryl and Hannah, this was not a scoping, it was just a general literature review. And our focus was on 2 databases, Eric and Taylor and Francis. And the queries we used are data literacy, research and publications, academic staff, and university. So from our search, we managed to get 133 papers from Eric. I'm happy to note that Eric is one of our, in conjunction with CESDA, they're one of our sponsors of this conference. So we managed to get 133 papers from Eric and 317 papers from Taylor and Francis, giving us a total of 450. When we screened, we found that 401 of them had overlaps and remained with 49. When we read the abstracts, we eliminated 28 and remained with 21 papers that we reviewed for this study. So from the study and from the literature, we found out that there are largely 7 categories of skills that are needed by academic staff if they are to be productive as far as research and publication is concerned. And these 7 categories are, academic staff need to have skills on how they need to be aware of where to access open data, how to use it, and also how to manipulate it. They also need skills on how to engage students in data literacy activities. Good enough, my previous speakers have spoken largely about this, I don't have to labor much. They will also need skills either as sole or joint to design teaching plans, schedules, that academic pedagogical instruction. They will need skills in that of data literacy. They also need skills in visualization of data. We all know this is very important as far as preparing research and publications is concerned. Storytelling, skills in storytelling, then the ethical use of data, and also how to preserve that data for long-term use. There have been some initiatives in Kyambogo University on creating awareness for open data. And that's a picture of one of our colleagues who was conducting how to access and use open data. From the literature, we found also good models on how to make data interesting for students as one of the skills that is needed, because we know that as you train others, you master what you're teaching. So According to the literature, they encourage academic staff to train to make data interesting to their students, and they master it. I've already talked about visualization. I will not labor much there, but this is a very good skill for academic staff if they are to make their papers interesting and to avoid to make their writings rich such that the publishing houses can accept and reduce the rejection rate. Storytelling, all those skills are very important. So because of time, I'm going to dwell more on on what we found. This study is still ongoing, but from the literature that we reviewed, we found out that some areas that need to be done to improve research and publication productivity, as far as data literacy is concerned, there's need for a policy, for a legal regulation for data literacy in the university, such that, for example, when you're talking about opening data, people are not afraid that maybe their data will be misused. So if there's a policy in place, it will guide all that. There's need also to develop this data literacy infrastructure, repositories, networks, internet bandwidth, and all that will be required. And then there's also need to build a data-centric human resource. People who are conscious about data literacy, who are ready to embrace this concept and run with it. Then there's also need to organize regular training in data literacy. This training can both be short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Then learning from peers is also an important strategy that can help in improving data literacy in the university, and ongoing exposure, for example, like encouraging academic staff to come for such conferences like IASSIST. We also broadened the scope for sub-Saharan Africa, but they're almost the same strategies. There's need to develop critical awareness programs about positive aspects of data literacy by having university-wide literacy advocacy programs. There's need to have a policy in place. There's need to make academic staff to make their data open and also access and use other actors' open data in their research. Our colleagues have already spoken about this, that you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel when there's already data on the same. There's need to develop continuous training. I've already spoken about that, to increase institutional state funding, monitoring systems, and to infuse data-driven decision-making knowledge skills in university. So this study is still ongoing, colleagues, but from the literature that we've reviewed, those are some of the recommendations that we think can help our colleagues who are still struggling in data literacy, and also to improve research and publication. As I conclude, I would like to acknowledge the IASSIST that has sponsored my travel to this conference. I am one of the IASSIST fellow for 2022. And also I want to appreciate Kyambogo University for allowing me to come. So thank you, colleagues, for listening. That marks the end of my presentation. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions?
I was just wondering, one of the things that I find challenging in working with faculty in a much more resourced environment than yours is just that asking for faculty time, right? So when you aren't offering to do the work for a faculty member, but are saying, I am happy to help you with your work, to learn a new skill. Another thing you're saying is, this is free, but it's not free, right? It costs time. And not all faculty members have that time to spend. So I guess I don't know, I guess I'm wondering how you feel like that might play out at your institution, and maybe yeah, some thoughts you have about how, what your plans are going forward.
Okay, thank you, Gabrielle, for that. I think it is a comment. Yeah, but what I have to say is that, yeah, it is true. It consumes time to offer that research support. And sometimes we are thin on the ground, but what sometimes we do, we take advantage of our graduate students who want to volunteer. So we encourage them to work with us. And sometimes for them, they have more time to offer that support. Like I think it was, I think in your presentation where you say that there are some statistical students who offer 10 hours in a week. So I think that's some approach that we are trying to adopt to address that by use of graduate students. They offer some of their time.
Another question from the audience.
Yes, I just wonder what you would say are the biggest challenges for open data in Uganda or generally in the region of like East Central Africa. Would you say it's more like support from the government or personal information protection, funding, technology? Would you say all of them, some of them more, some of them less? Interest by researchers for the academic.
Yeah, thank you, Dimitri. Yeah, there are many challenges, but I think the three leading challenges are, the first is the resistance to change. Many of our researchers, when they conduct their studies, they don't want to open their data. Even if you tell them, you advise them to upload it or design data management plans, you find that there's a lot of resistance to that. Then, like you said, we also have issues of infrastructure. We don't have a lot of repositories and those things. Then also funding. Those are the key challenges I'm seeing as far as data literacy is concerned in Uganda specifically.
Thank you for that. I think we're out of time. I have some questions about the methods for your study, but I'll just ask you over lunch. All right, everyone, thank you so much for attending today. And if we could give just one more round of applause for our excellent speakers today.
Thank you very much.
Virtually. You're so welcome. Yeah, thank you.